Hello everybody and welcome back to the Grim Dawn Newcomer's Guide. In today's episode, we will be taking a look at the most fun Nemesis boss to say the name of. It's Moosilauke the Chillwind, who is a titanic grave golem with a whole lot of cold damage, and this boss is the closest thing to bullet hell you will find in Grim Dawn. But let me get the pleasantries out of the way. Ahem. The like button is cold, please warm it up with a click. The comment section is empty, liven it up with some words. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed, well then, what are you doing with your life? Your parents must be worried sick. Now, where were we? Well, let's take a look at what I can consider the longest Nemesis boss fight of the entire group. Moosilauke the Chillwind is the Arkovian Undead's Nemesis boss fight and can be found in one of 9 different locations. As is tradition with our previous bosses, the key dungeon levels and the Steps of Torment are all possible locations to find Moose and are very linear for your exploratory needs. The map and the minimap have a very large radii for catching the Nemesis Skull indicator, and the key dungeon levels for the Steps of Torment are very small. So what I'm saying is that you'll almost know immediately once you're near him if you are in the key dungeon. Now, the remaining locations are all in Act 2, but they can be a little bit goofy in shape, so we'll touch on that a bit. We're going to start with Old Arkovia because this location has its own rift gate and is likely the area that everyone is most familiar with. Once you take the rift gate, however, you only have half of the equation out of the way. The biggest trouble with Old Arkovia is that it's actually split up into 2 locations by a big canyon. The first and smaller area is the one connected to the rift gate, which is also where the rover camp is. The second larger area is just below the Twin Falls Rift Gate and is where you'll go just before you go underground to deal with the Arkovian Undercity. There is a way to make this easier though, so let's do that. Since Old Arkovia basically has 2 entries on our checklist, we're going to use the Rift Gate and then head north into Four Hills. Four Hills is the area that is full of bandits and the bandit fighting pit that everyone avoids like the plague. And this whole area is super linear despite being a big spiral, so you'll blast through keeping an eye on your minimap until you round the place into Cronley's Mine. If you manage to get to this area and scoured it as you should, there is a small nook that is blocked off by dynamite on the southeastern side of Four Hills, so before you go blowing through it with your dynamite, just make sure to open up your map, because you should be able to catch a glimpse of the Nemesis Skull before wasting precious resources on it. If our big boy isn't there, then don't worry about it, because after we've checked off the Four Hills and the first half of Old Arkovia, we can simply hop over to the Twin Falls Rift Gate and make our way southerly. From here, we can start cleaning up the second Old Arkovia area before leading down into the Arkovian Undercity. Keep that map handy because Old Ark is not huge, but it is not small either. And at this point, if we haven't managed to meet the beast, we are going to want to venture down into the underground. This is no burgeoning conspiracy theory, folks. This is just a whole bunch of lifeless bodies to smash underneath the ground. That sounds reasonable, right? Anyway, the Arkovian Undercity has 3 levels in total, but you'll only need to search the first and second floor to find Moose. The 3rd level is Chillwind's area, so definitely give that a visit and farm if you need some materials, but he's not our highest priority at the moment. There is a pretty large amount of traversing in these locations, so be patient, stick it out, and keep your eyes peeled. I managed to catch the big guy in this area after speedrunning the shit out of the previous locations, so no key dungeon required. There is one other location that can find Moose, or that you can find Moose if everything up to the key dungeon has turned up nothing though, and that is called the Crumbling Watch. This area is relatively small, so you should know right away if he's here, but in order to get there you'll need simply to take the Arkovian Foothills Rift Gate and travel east. Check the upper right hand corner of the screen for that title area, but after that you'll know if you're about to die from a surprise Moose attack. It's time to talk about combat though. Moose is, dare I say, one of the most patience-demanding bosses in the entire game. He's not necessarily difficult to kill, but if you're a melee like me that needs to get close and deal damage, you're going to have to pay very close attention to your windows of opportunity. It goes without saying at this point that Moose has the CC and health reduction immunities, so we'll leave that at the door. but the resistance that Moose comes with is a mega resistance to cold and vitality damage. So hooray, another boss that actually eats all of my damage types for breakfast. I'm crying on the inside, but I am an adult, so let's get on with this. Of all the resistances that Moose has, the Aether and Chaos are his lowest, so if you're majoring in either of those, you are off to a great start. This guy has over 2 million health on ultimate, so he is going to absorb mountains of damage, and as far as his abilities go, since they're all cold-based, you can probably guess that freezing enemies is a big part of this guy's shtick. In fact, I was frozen so much on the first few attempts that I decided to revamp parts of my build and gear just to allow me to better deal with damage inside my non-frozen windows. If I'm being honest, I kind of like the changes anyway, so that wasn't the worst thing in the world. But back to Moose. So first off, he has a short-range version of Olextra's Flash Freeze. If you're not aware, this is the Frost Nova ability that will freeze you and reduce your resistances to physical and cold damage while dealing you damage. Pretty medium level cooldown on it for the boss, but I would recommend just staying out of melee range when possible. Nextly, Moose can rain down shards of lightning and cold from the sky in a very large area, and it's basically going to rain Trozen Sky Shard for 12 seconds, dealing cold, physical, and lightning damage. As long as your feet are moving, you shouldn't have to worry too hard about getting hit by these very often, but all that considered, Moose also is going to spawn some skeletal archers. He can have 8 of these at a time, which might not sound like much, but if you're frozen and eating archer damage on top of getting punched by a gigantic skeletal gargantuan, you're not going to be having a good time. Moose's next ability is a wave of water that deals cold and physical damage, and upon hitting you will also rain down more lightning and cold shards. This ability has a very telegraphed windup though, and travels very slowly, so the moral of the story is don't stand in front of the Moose when the wave is about to crash. This thing hurts a lot, and it will also slow you, which makes you much easier to freeze and kill. Now there are 2 components to the next part of this boss, and the first, the first that I'll mention is actually an ability. So this is going to come in the latter half of the fight, but the by far the worst ability that Moose has is called the Summon Ice Crystals. Ice Crystals are similar to Benjar's mines in appearance, but they operate differently in how they're set out to kill you. Moose can summon 9 of these at a time, and depending on what area that you are in, you can easily get overrun by them. The ice crystals will fire off projectiles in full circles around themselves, and these projectiles will freeze you and will stack that freeze with other projectiles. You can essentially be freeze-locked if you're not ready for it. So the one saving grace to the ice crystals is that they are targetable and killable, so if you're keeping an eye on the fight with him that we're playing in the video, you'll notice that I'm going to use them as an escape tool on occasion if I need to make some distance while waiting for my Mark of Torment to come back up. Now, all those abilities aren't something that Moose has baseline. Like I was mentioning earlier, the Ice Crystal portion of the game only comes in the second part, and that is the biggest tragedy of the boss fight, because when you're fighting him on phase 1, you'll think that you're doing great. He's taking a lot of damage. It's like, wow, this isn't too hard at all. But then, bam, he says, nah, bro, my pre-workout just kicked in, and proceeds to grow 10 feet taller, get 2.5 million health, and then give just absolutely 0 fucks about how many ice flowers are on the ground, rather than in a nice bouquet to give to your mother. So, it's obviously just a bad time for everybody. It's specifically during phase 2 of this boss fight that you'll have to get much better at dodging the random garbage coming at you while trying to hit him at every available instance that you've got. Moose is no pushover, and just because he takes a while to kill does not mean that he cannot instantly end you if you are not paying attention. So it is for this reason that I will say that the Hoarfrost Ointment is an absolute necessity. On top of all of your own resistances to CC, this ointment will reduce freeze duration by 66%. And obviously there are plenty of other ointments that are helpful too, but this one specifically will help you deal with the hardest aspect of the Moose Man. Cool, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the Moose Shoulders. Moose will give you either pauldrons or shoulder guards. And then Moosilake's pauldrons give you a 40 to 60 offensive ability, increasing your attack speed. They increase your casting speed and your physical and pierce resistance while giving you that +3 into Phantasmal Blades, Devouring Swarm, and Drain Essence. Some pretty cool bleedy abilities, all things considered, but, not really my bag at the moment. The shoulder guards, though, which I was lucky enough to roll instead, provide 491 to 737 in health, add 3 to 5% in health on top of that, and then up your physical and elemental resistances. They go on to add +3 to Sky Shard, Ring of Steel, and Rune of Haggard. So, not anything that I really super need at the moment, but I've actually put the Moose Shoulders on for this run anyway, because they were loaded with stats that I really wanted, and my previous shoulders were only just kind of okay. But anyway, that is going to do it, everybody, for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back here tomorrow to talk about our next nemesis, Kaizen the Eldritch Scion, stomping his way into your nightmares with his blades for hands and big green farts. Ta-ta.